Give them a hand. Hello. Hello. Hi, guys. Thank you for coming. My name is Sang Huang. I'm a senior threat researcher at Proof Project. I'm also a pen tester, over 10 years experience. This talk when will be presented. I hope you guys enjoy this talk. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sun. Let me just see if the clicker is working. Okay, cool. Thank you for coming to our talk. So today we're going to be talking about the Asprox group. And I think one key point of this talk is their Asprox was pretty active. It was launching campaigns with millions and millions of messages daily. And then all of a sudden, at end of 2015, it just died away. Many researchers believe that they have ceased their operation, and we'll talk today about how this is not true. They're still active. They have just changed their ways of operation. A lot has been published about how their malware works, and that's not our focus today. Our focus today is how they run their operations and how their tools work. How do they infect people? And we're a Proof Point, Sun and I, and we're at a Taiwan Proof Point office. So we flew all the way from Taiwan here. We'll do an Asprox campaign overview, how they spread malware, strategy changes from 14 to 16. We'll be dissecting their TDS server, and we'll talk about their command and control infrastructure, economics of their cyber black market, how they're able to massively buy admin credentials from a black market that they operate themselves. And we'll make a conclusion. Asprox is a well-known family of malware that's been used, as far as we know, by a single attacker, by a single actor that is Russian-speaking. And they have been around since 2007, mostly targeting Windows users. They have had success infecting Android devices since 2014, third quarter. And we have been tracking them since October 2014. They're Russian-speaking. And malware is not the focus today, but it is really their operations and tools. So this group, as I believe many of you know, what they do is they try to infect endpoints by massively sending out email spams. And usually with links embedded in these emails, personalized links, meaning that every single email has a different URL. We call these personalized URLs. And these URLs point to legitimate but compromised web servers that will ultimately redirect to malware. And they spam using a wide array of social engineering lures. So DHL, FedEx, couriers, coupons, gift certificates, court notifications, etc. They have about 30 email templates that they frequently use. Oops. Oh. Okay. So, okay, so I'll use that one. I'll just get over here. But I can't see my slides. Okay, they do delivery testing, which means that for every campaign before they launch, they love to use these two services, Scan4U and AV Detect. And they'll use, and this is what we call delivery testing. So what they'll do is they'll use these services and make sure that their email template, the domains that they're using, all of the compromised legitimate websites that they have purchased access to and have hosted malicious scripts on, and the malicious scripts themselves, all of these are not detected by any antivirus. And these are the two services that they love to use. These are like VirusTotal. They check scripts, URLs, domains to see if any of these are flagged by any of the well-known antivirus. So this chart is basically how they operate. They have a set of tools which will show you the screenshots of these tools. They use these tools to pre-configure all of the campaigns that they want to send out and the time frame they want to send out. And it's very geo-specific. For every geolocation, they have different email templates and they have different time frames where they have different volumes of messages that they want to send out. They'll send out these email. Within every single message, there is a personalized URL. And these personalized URLs point to legitimate but compromised web servers. And they massively purchase these web servers, the admin credentials to these web servers from an underground market that they run themselves. So when the user clicks on these URLs, they're actually going to a legitimate website but compromised and injected with a PHP script that's developed by this group. The PHP script will do some validation, and then, for example, if a researcher tampers with the URL, it wouldn't redirect. If it's happy, it will redirect to a TDS. The TDS server, which, and we believe that this TDS script is developed by themselves, and they didn't get it from off-the-shelf stuff. And this TDS will further verify whether the visitor is someone that they do want to infect, whether you're coming from the right geolocation, whether your IP belongs to a crawler, a bot, or a security vendor, things like that, and whether you have visited them more than 5 times. And if they're happy with all of the above, they will then serve you. The TDS server will come up with a file name, usually a zip file containing malware, and it will give you that file. If the user then extracts the zip, installs the executable, and gets infected, then their bot will link back to the botnet. The compromised endpoint will become a part of the botnet and will try to link back to the command and control. Before the command and control, we have seen about more than 50 reverse proxies that are trying to shield the actual command and control servers, which are only about 1 or 2. But they've got 50 of those Nginx-based reverse proxies to shield the real C2 server address. And so we'll show you the entire infrastructure and all of the tools. These are what their email campaigns look like, and there's about 30 templates or so. Sending out spam. How do they send out the spam? What they used to do a lot is through an SMTP module on the infected PC. So they used to use infected PCs to send out these spam. So they'll install an SMTP module on the infected PCs. Nowadays, what they do, because they have since end of 2005, they have stopped spreading the ASPROX malware. So now they have a decreasing volume of infected PCs. Now, these days, they send out these spam emails through a web shell and a PHP mailer on the legitimate but compromised web servers. So nowadays, they send out more from the web servers. Before, it was on infected PCs. how do they send out once they have these modules? Either these are just SMTP modules, either on the PC or on the server, both the same. They use legitimate but compromised email accounts that they have purchased. For example, like these, and they send it out this way. So the emails that are sending these spam out are legitimate but compromised emails. How much assets do they have? They have about 2 billion targeted email addresses that they purchased. They own almost 1 million SMTP accounts. More than 1 million PHP web shells that support email sending. So these are PHP scripts, backdoors that they have injected into legitimate websites. More than 1 million. That also helps them send these out. And 30 or so email templates. And here you can see the spam backend. This is the sender tasks. So you can see that through this interface, they're able to pre-configure what region to target, what email template to send out, and you can see from the very right column, every campaign. Most of these campaigns are more than a million messages per campaign. So this is one of their back-end panels. And here we can see that it's very geo-targeted. So they would configure, they organize their emails, all of that 1 billion targeted emails into different databases, and every database contains emails for that particular region. They have one for UK, they have one for Australia, they have one for North America, things like that. And this is where they configure, all right, from which, so they have this big botnet, right, either from the PCs or from the servers that they own. They will configure, all right, for this set of email, for this set of UK emails, when do we want to start? When do we want to end? And so this is how they pre-configure all of the campaigns that they want to send out. They can further go into detail, as we may have another screen to show you, for example, the pause between every single email that they send out. And in order to get the targeted email addresses, the SMTP accounts that they use to send, and also the legitimate but compromised web servers. How do they buy these credentials? Well, they run their own marketplace, and they have over 1,600 sellers currently registered on their marketplace. A lot of these, as we later found out, are just hackers interested but not really selling. There are about 150 sellers that actually made a sale in this marketplace, selling them the credentials. So this is how the marketplace looks like. A WSO FTP account sells for about $0.50 to $2 per account. SMTP accounts sell for $350 per 1,000 account. SSH root is $20 per account, and SSH user is $5 per account. And here you can see that this is how you sell web shells to them. By web shells, we mean PHP backdoors. So if I'm a hacker, I massively hack into, let's say, 1,000 WordPress sites. And so on these 1,000 WordPress sites, I have my WSO backdoor. How do I sell it to these guys? You have to upload a text file that complies with their format, and their format is very simple. URL of the web shell, colon, and the password, right? So for each line, and they have a script that validates this, calculates and then goes and tests the login and calculates how much money they want to pay you. So it's fully automated. If you comply with this format, you can go and you can sell these to them. And so from what we saw in their database, about 150 active sellers that actually do business with them. We were able to monitor them for about 9 months, and over which time they spent 135,000 USD just purely on buying these accounts. So they do have pretty good budget to buy. So there's significant business in this marketplace. And they have a dashboard of everything that they buy. So good bookkeeping, good accounting on their behalf. So we dug into how these sellers are able to massively infect so many websites. And it turns out that it's mostly through open source vulnerabilities to WordPress and Drupal, Joomla, and e-commerce open source infrastructure. So the sellers, what they do is whenever, for example, WordPress comes out with a patch, they would go and study that an update. They would go and study that update and say, oh, so WordPress patched this vulnerability. And so they'll write a script to massively scan all WordPress websites for whichever website that didn't patch during that same day, didn't upgrade within that same day, and then just inject the web shell. Okay, so their URLs, the URLs inside the emails that point to the PHP script that they inject. So once they have these WSO shells, they will inject the asprox PHP script into these websites, right? And the URLs are personalized URLs that's embedded inside emails that points to these injected PHP. They frequently change PHP file names that they upload to these legitimate websites. They obfuscate and pack malware daily. Their malware is the ultimate zip file that a visitor is prompted to download if all of the scripts were happy with the visitor. And they do a lot of checks. For example, this check checks if a single IP tries to download file more than 5 times, then they'll reject it. And this is their PHP code. So as you can see, they throw out a 404 response page if they're not happy with the URL. So for example, if the URL has been tampered. And because this is a customized 404 page, they wrote this code themselves, and that's why if you know the code, and for us security vendors, when we get an HTTP response that looks like this, we know it's asprox. Very interestingly, so these are legitimate web servers, right? And they're injecting PHP into it. So sometimes the admin will discover that their website has been injected with a piece of PHP code, and so when the web admins find this file and they open it up, they will see an IP, right? And you'll tend to think that IP is the asprox IP. Well, that's a decoy IP. It's there. It has no use. It's there just to fake the eye. So if you look at it and you say, oh, here's the IP address, this must be the attacker. Well, that's an IP in China that has nothing to do with them. The real IP that they're redirecting the visitor to has to be decrypted, and the decryption code is down there. So you actually have to go through a decryption process to know where they're directing you to. It's a simple XOR, and it decodes to something like this. And the personalized URL is interesting because within every email, right, there is a different URL. But this URL contains a UUID that if you know the algorithm and it's encrypted in base 64 and AES. But if you know their key and you know the algorithm, you decode it back, then what you get out of that UUID is the sender ID. So which bot or compromised web server sent that email, the URL ID, the database ID. So the which database does the recipient email reside in, and also the mail ID. Okay, and it's very useful when you're studying this group because that UUID actually contains all of this information. And if the PHP script is happy with all of the attributes, it will redirect you to their own TDS server. And this is how the redirected URL looks like. And within it, there are several parameters: the user's IP, the landing file path, the victim's UUID propagated over, and the user agent. And then the TDS, since 2014 Q3, the TDS, other than validating if the IP is good, if the geolocation is good, it will also use the user agent. If you're coming from Windows, it will give you a Windows zip file to download. If you're coming from Android, it will give you an APK to download. And that's why they're having a user agent string there. Okay, so the TDS itself, the TDS server generated a zip file, log the victim data, include IP and UUID, ban unwanted user downloads based on blacklist. So they have a big list of security vendor IPs. And they were vulnerable to directly listing. That's how we're able to study them. They fixed it in end of 2014. And they have this alert feature that notifies themselves through Jabber of snooping security researchers. So if you use a single IP and you keep on hitting them, they'll actually get notified through their Jabber account that, hey, this IP is probably a security researcher and is trying to probe us. And that's their code. We got their code of how they're leveraging Jabber to do this. Their TDS server changed IP 6 times, and the URL path 4 times in the past 21 months. So they don't change the TDS IP a lot, actually. They have 4 actual, and when you're infected, the malware connects back to the C2 server through a layer of reverse proxies, Nginx reverse proxies. And they actually we saw a total of 4 C2 servers overall. So only 4 unique IPs that we saw. And spreading about 5 different malware families. And all of these are located in Russia or Ukraine. They use Nginx-based reverse proxies to hide these IPs. And they also took some steps to make sure that when these reverse IPs are found out and somebody goes in and look at the Nginx servers, that you cannot tell by the config file of the Nginx servers where their real IP is. And they have these decoy IPs. So what they do is when they start these Nginx servers, one thing first. So one characteristic is if you look at their log files, they swap error log and access log. So that's one characteristic. We don't know why they do it, but in their configuration, it's non-typical. Their errors are logged in access.log, and access is logged in error.log. Now this is how they decoy. They have the actual configuration file when they start the Nginx servers. And if you look at their script, right after they start the Nginx servers, they then delete that configuration file, regenerate a configuration file with a decoy IP. So when we go in, let's say there's a server that's compromised and that's being used as their reverse proxy shield, Now we go in and we look at the configuration file, we'll see a configuration file with a decoy IP that was generated after the Nginx proxy has been launched, after they start that process. And one way they monitor, they install these bots, right? They used to install these Asprox bots. Another way that they monetize is Asprox later came with urlviewer.dll, and these DLL drive impressions. So it's kind of like selling ads. So when the browser opens, it will open a new tab, and it will load some web page that's paying them money. And they get paid per impression. And this bot has its own command and control that's telling the bot which impressions to load, which web page to load. And we found about 32,000 bots and 167 tasks. And the tasks are telling the bots which page to load. And so that's a different C2 server. And this server is different. It's basically telling the bots to load whichever page that's paying them. And starting from June 2014, we saw that they started to try on Android malware, and they did have some success. So it used to be just zip downloads, and you can see from 2014 June, they started to have APKs. The APKs support these 5 plugins: steal device info, get device contacts, get your SMS, get your GPS location, and record your calls. During the 4 months that we were able to monitor their Android botnet, we saw a total of 5,000 or so Android infections. And this was when they first started to experience with Android. And this was their Android command and control panel. The interesting thing is click to final conversion rate is 5.5%, which is pretty high. So starting from a click to, if somebody clicks, then 5 out of 100 people click actually get infected, which from our experience is pretty high. And you can see, for example, on the lower right corner, once you get infected, all of your SMS gets automatically sent to the server, and they're displaying for every device. If you click on any of these devices, you get to the screen where you're able to see their last 3 SMS, and you can click for more, and all of the modules that it's running, things like that. Their Android C2 server is also shielded by a layer of Nginx proxies, just like their Windows, except they only have one C2 server for their Android, and they're shielding it, at the time we were studying them, about 9 Nginx servers. Data stolen during the 4 months that we monitored them, 752,000 contacts, more than 1 million SMS messages, about 1,000 location lists, and about 20,000 email addresses, 60,000 physical addresses, 650,000 phone numbers. And the phone numbers are important because they also started to SMS these phone numbers to further spread. So rather than using email, they also use SMS. So that's why they need the phone numbers. They love to steal all of the SMS messages. And then they started to run a Android bot rental service, which is you can actually query by place, by city, by operator. So for example, if I want to have an Android, to have a control of an Android device here in Luxembourg, I can query the region or the city, Luxembourg, and I'll get a list of infected devices, and I can rent that device. So then I can ask that Android device to send out SMS or to do things for me. So they started to do it, and I think it's $20 an hour, the rental service. Click statistics. Within the 4 months that we're able to study them, you can see that the red ones are the blacklisted clicks, and the blue ones are the good clicks. So as you can see, on Windows, almost half of the clicks are blocked. They do not serve to half of the clicks. They don't like half of the clicks. We believe this is probably because, like for us, for Proofpoint, every single email we scan with our sandbox, right? And sometimes we do get blocked. And so if you have different security vendors, you have Proofpoint, you have Palo Alto, you have FireEye, then actually when an email comes in, a lot of security vendors go scan that URL, and some do get blocked. And that's why we think about half of the clicks get blocked, according to their logs. On Android, much less. And this may be because less researchers at that time had Android sandboxing or were using Android VMs to study them. So much less blocked for Android. Click the geo-distribution. They're very targeted. So they have specific databases for every region, and they do not infect. I think they only infect no more than 24 regions. So from their logs, this reflects where they're infecting, where their malware, the malware downloads happen. Actually, not a lot. Their strategy change. We believe that certain investigation bureau took action against this group end of 2015. And so all of a sudden they disappeared. But actually they didn't disappear. They sharply stopped to spread any Asprox malware, either on Windows or on Android. They just stopped. But the group didn't stop. They started to try for alternative ways to make revenue. And the first thing they tried was the porn and weight loss scams. So they started to test out whether scams can make them money. But all of a sudden, they ceased operation on building botnets. But they still actively purchase compromised websites to spam out these scams. What they figured out would work is fraudulent dating sites. So they wrote these chatbots themselves, and so they built these dating sites, and if you pay them a fee, you can chat with ladies, but these are the bots that they wrote. Okay? So the Asprox malware guys now run dating sites. And they have not disappeared, guys. So this is what they do now. In order to prove that you're over 18, you have to verify your age. To verify your age, you have to give them your credit card. That's one way to make money. And there's a VIP membership charge. A subscription auto monthly renewed subscription sells for $118 to get you to talk to their robots. So they are not dead, and they're probably making good money from what we can see. And so they steal a lot of assets. WSL web shells today buy unique domains, more than 3 million, out of which we have some government and some military ones. By web shells by unique file name, almost 8 million. FTP accounts, 500,000. SSH root access, 1,000 or so. SSH users, 50,000. Conclusion, it's hard to track this group because they use a lot of decoy techniques and they shield their command and control. They run their own market, they have good budget to pay. So they keep on acquiring new assets and building these up, not by hacking, but by buying them. They changed strategy from malware campaigns now to email scams. Just from the asset that they're able to buy from this underground market, we do believe that mass-scale web server compromise through open source vulnerabilities is still very prevalent and remains widely used. That's it for our talk today. Do we have time for questions? Thank you.
We do have 8 minutes.
Hi. How did you get the exact numbers of their assets?
Yeah, so these attackers, usually these attackers have a lot of misconfigured servers, open directory access, vulnerable open source software. So that allows us to get access to all their databases. And of course, as we start to disclose them, they will harden these infrastructure up. And so usually when we start to talk about them, we lose access. So we usually monitor them for a time before we start to publish them. Yeah, it's through misconfiguration and vulnerabilities.
No further questions?
So you are basically hacking the hackers. Do they hack back to you?
We try not to let them. Usually they know us. They know all of the security vendors very well because their command and control panel. If you see their logs, right? They would launch a campaign, and you would see immediately tons of clicks, all from similar IPs, right? Us, Palo Alto, just security vendors. So they just know the security vendors very well. And we try not to let them know that we're studying them. So we anonymize our IPs. And also, not only when we research them, but also when we try to scan them. Otherwise, we wouldn't know that it's Asprox, but if they recognize our IP, we wouldn't get the malware. So we don't know what malware they're spreading. We want to know that. So actually, for security vendors today, IP anonymization is a big thing that we have to do well. Yeah.
One last question.
You mentioned a number of notable victims. Have you done any work in notifying victims, especially with so many out there?
So we have a division at Proofpoint that works with the investigation bureaus. And yes, so we regularly just provide them with the intel that we have. So we don't directly notify them or participate in the takedowns. But these bureaus work with, there are quite a few takedown vendors that do this. And they do this professionally. So that's how the process works. We hand the intel over, and I believe what those guys do is they work with the takedown vendors. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you a lot. It's not the first time we see someone at Hack.lu hacking the hackers back, so good job, and let's say thank you to
All right,
Lane
thank you
and
guys.
to
Thanks.